Historically, you read articles that every time taxes go up, tax receipts go down.
They do.
Why doesn't this mentality become real to the legislators that raise the taxes?
I think, great question. There are some in Washington who really believe we are an undertaxed nation, that we just don't pay enough, and if we did, it would solve everything. And the truth is, we're an overtaxed nation. And one of the reasons we've actually had stronger economies throughout the rest of the world is historically we've kept our federal government, at around 18 to 20% at most of our economy. So we've never had to drag a huge, like Europe, they have to drag this huge government anchor around their economy. That's why they're always higher unemployment, don't pay as well, jobs, the economy's always behind our. But with this bill and with the explosion of spending, we're creating such a large government, they think if they can increase taxes enough, they can pay for it. But you're right. Whenever you raise taxes, people's behavior changes. You raise income tax, people stop earning wages. And people in those higher income levels go, I don't really need to work longer. I don't need to make that investment. I can reverse and change it. And you always have that declining curve. Always do. So it won't get them where they think it's going to get them.
There's also an issue that there's going to be a value-added tax, possibly making us more Europeanized and socialized.
Have you guys heard of this value-added tax? It is, for Washington, it is the politician's dream tax. Here's why. It's hidden, it sounds small, and you never know you're paying. Because it's added in increments to each step of the production stage and value of any product from an ag product that turns eventually into whatever. Every stage along the way, the tax is added. So at the end of the day, whatever product you're buying has that hidden tax in it, usually pretty significant. It raises a boatload of money for the government, and taxpayers never see. It's not like sales tax. You see it right there. You know what I mean? It's not income tax. You see it, in your taxes. And so we don't know. They're floating it out as an idea right now. We think they're going to go for it. I can tell you in Ways and Means Committee, a group of us have already met because that tax would have to start with our committee. We met the week before Easter to start the strategy and how we stop it, because it is again a tax that will go on forever, and it will drive those prices up, and you'll never know it. Thanks for raising that, sir.
It's obvious that I guess Medicare cuts are going to be a thing in the future, and higher prescription drugs. As far as our local hospital is concerned, what kind of notice will we be given as far as when these cuts are coming and what to expect as far as making our budget?
It's going to be difficult because they identified a number of the cuts in the bill. Some, like home health and others, they identified what the cuts would be for each year going forward. But inpatient, outpatient, which is the bulk of the hospital cuts, I don't know if they did that. Let me check to see if they sort of laid out the timetable for that. Then there were imaging cuts and cuts in disproportionate share, which is helpful for hospitals that have large Medicaid and low-income patients. But let me double check to see if they have a schedule on the hospital cuts. But it's significant. Medicare estimates that these cuts will result in 1 out of every 5 hospitals becoming unprofitable as a result. 1 out of 5. And frankly, we don't have that many profitable hospitals to start with these days. So
it sounds like that's the intent, is to close us down.
I hope not. It's a huge mistake. Yes, sir.
What is the best way to kill this bill?
Too late.
No, it's not too late.
Yes, what's the best way to kill this bill? It is very difficult to change federal law once it is the law of the land. That's why so much effort was put in to stop it before it became. My goal is to repeal this bill and replace it with real reform, focused on lawsuit reform, lowering health care costs, all that. it's going to be very difficult to do. One, you can't change it at all if you have the same House, Senate, and White House, for one thing. Secondly, if you do make a change, you on one of those chambers, especially the House, you have the opportunity to zero fund parts of this bill that we disagree with, and you also have the opportunity to pull out the worst portions of it and hold it up for votes. Now, it's going to create a conflict with the White House, I know that, but that would be my recommendation on how we go forward.
What about taking this to the Supreme Court that they're doing now? And how long is it going to take to do this?
Yeah, y'all have probably read our Attorney General, Greg Abbott, has joined the Help Leading Coalition, now 16 or 17 states, challenging the constitutionality of this bill on a couple different grounds. And then there's some separate lawsuits by the state of Virginia and some individual Attorney General. I'm not a lawyer. I'm a Chamber of Commerce manager. That's what I've done my whole adult life, to help small businesses and help build communities. So I'm not a lawyer. But Greg Abbott was on a telephone town hall with us the other day. And we asked him, what are the chances, what's the basis, what's the timetable? Here's what he told us. To a layman like me, he made a pretty good case that it is not constitutional to force someone to buy the individual mandate, force somebody to buy an insurance product. And here's why. The federal government powers have exploded. I don't know if you can ever get that horse back in the barn, but this expansion is significant. Before, they used the Constitution, the Commerce Clause, to regulate transactions throughout the country. Constitutionally, Washington could impose itself. But this is the first time they've actually forced you, an individual, to buy an insurance product, to enter into the market. And once you're in the market, they use the Commerce Clause to regulate you. So you wouldn't be in that market, but the government just told you have to. And now you're in it, we're going to regulate. So they think they have a pretty good case that that's unconstitutional, because if you allow that to stand, the federal government could compel you to buy a General Motors car, because now we own it as taxpayers. It's the right thing to do. Compel individual action simply because you exist. It's not like auto insurance, where you have to make a choice. Both you want to drive, and two, you want to drive on public roads. Therefore, you have to have auto insurance. This is a huge expansion of that. So I think they have some pretty good grounds for it. Secondly, states' rights. They're arguing that compelling states like Texas have to come up with another $24 billion. That's you and me. To pay for Medicaid expansion is another imposition on states' rights. In this lawsuit, they have an injunction to stop this bill from going forward. They don't know what the outcome of that's going to be. But bottom line, timetable, they think they could get a court decision by the end of the year, because there's no discovery in this. The Constitution is what it is. The bill is what it is. It's all arguing over it, not learning more things about each other's case. Then it will be appealed to appeals court. Then the loser will appeal to Supreme Court. So Greg Abbott feels like we might have a decision from the Supreme Court within 2 years or so, which would be a pretty quick timetable all in all. So I don't know if they'll prevail. I do support the lawsuit. I think it's important to challenge.
The other
What do you
question
think?
is, why can't you, as in the House of Representatives, all the money have to be appropriated in the House? What would happen if our House majority was Republicans, and they decide they don't like this bill, and they don't appropriate money for it? It looks to me like it's dead.
Well, it would set up a huge battle with the White House.
Why? You've got a battle anyway with it.
Well, I was just going to finish the sentence, and that's what we intend to do. So, again, not all the bill, but the bad portions of the bill need to be stopped. We do. So.
Why don't you just stop all of it? I mean, just don't appropriate any money for this health care bill, and it's dead. But you got to have the majority, I understand that, and Republicans in the House. But I think that's possible. especially if the people in the United States understand this is what could happen if the House turns Republican and they don't appropriate money for this bill. It's dead in the water.
I'm going to keep this meeting bipartisan, I'm just telling you. I like those ideas. I've been ignoring this side all day. Questions or comments here? Yes, sir.
If, I don't know if this number is correct, but 56% of the nation was against this bill before it was voted on. Is that close?
Actually, the very hour on Sunday night when we were voting on this, I don't know if any of you watched that, but that very night, the poll that evening said 59% of Americans were opposed to this bill.
Then who's listening to, what Congress people are listening to their constituents?
Yeah.
That's the really critical part, I think, that when Nancy Pelosi can make the laws in this country that 59% of people don't believe in, then we've got a problem.
I think that's, at the end, their arguments were, you need to vote for this, it's the president's legacy, it's Speaker Pelosi's legacy, and we need to get this behind us. I think they think that people will forget about this bill by November. I don't think they will. In fact, and the reason is, the public is amazingly informed on health. Don't you all know more now than you did a year ago about healthcare, how it fits together? It's complex to say the least. But we actually have a pretty informed electorate. And the more they studied the bill, the more they opposed it. Which you can keep talking all you want. The public that's doing the studying and examining oppose it. There's this arrogance, this sort of we know best approach, and I think you're talking about repeal, but I think some lawmakers are going to get repealed, who didn't listen to their constituents.
It seems to me the problem right now with it is that if you look at the newspapers and the Sunday morning news panel things, all we hear about really is not so much the content of the bill, but the political machinations that you need to get through it. So the political process is all that's been concentrated on. So we know all about that, but there's not apparently not everyone, most people don't know what's in the bill. And a lot of it is perhaps missed. I don't know.
A lot of the provisions of the House and Senate bill people are familiar with are in this, just in different versions. And in truth, on specific parts of it, I'll mix up what was in one of the other versions with this. But I think we're learning more and more each day, and then as the new rules and guidelines play out, we're going to learn even more about it. But I'll guarantee you, Doctor, not one member of Congress read this bill before it passed. Yes, ma'am.
With this bill being proposed by so many people in America and the Congress passing it anyways by the majority vote, how does this healthcare affect them that voted it in?
Yeah, great question. You may remember in July when we came to Ways and Means Committee, we offered an amendment that members of Congress and their families become part of this bill. If they think it's so great for America, let them join it. And they voted down on party lines. They said it's important members of Congress have choices. That's what they said. Yeah. At the end of the day, they actually did include some members of Congress. For example, I and our staff by 2014 have to be part of the state exchanges, which is good. But they exempted some people. Leadership office, like Speaker Pelosi and Harry Reid, are exempted from that.
Sure.
Committee staffs, like healthcare, energy, commerce, all that, are exempted, and the White House is exempted from this bill. So the very people who, at the end of the day, were in the tiny room and wrote the final version, specifically wrote themselves out of the bill. Which ought to tell you. Well, it ought to tell you something about their faith. By the way, we've introduced legislation so they can join us in the joy of being part of this healthcare bill going forward. So, but that tells you, and I think some of the anger of the public is that Congress just doesn't live with its own rules. You know what I mean? Everyone, it's good for everyone else, but not for members. So, and that's going to come back and haunt you.
It's going to all be made public.
Yeah, and it will be. Yes, sir.
How did they come up with the 200,000, 250, some of these incomes as rich in the United States? What was the...
How they come up with $250,000 as being wealthy, rich, and subject to the taxes? Because that was the president's campaign plan. That they would not raise taxes on anyone making less than that. But this bill does. All those taxes I laid out end up being paid by you, not by the companies along the way. And I always remind people, again, from a small business background, that almost half of all small business income is reported as individuals. So you're not taxing Bill Gates. You're taxing professionals and small business people. You know, when you tax these, and those are the job creators, those are the innovators. And as someone said, why do you want to punish people who may stay in school longer, you know, risk everything for small business, build up an engineering firm? You know, why do you want to punish people who, in America, we sort of reward success and achievement? And so it's the opposite. They also, that investment income, there's more taxes coming that way because the president's proposed about $3 trillion in new taxes in his budget. A lot of them will land on top of the same people.
Yeah.
Sir.
With this big increase in everything, I foresee a lot of American businesses leaving the United States because they're not going to afford the cost. And we're already at that point now. How do we stop that?
It's going to be, the question was worried about businesses leaving America because of these costs and a lot of other costs. And I think it's a real concern. Our tax code is, we used to have a low tax code. We encouraged innovation work. We had a highly skilled workforce, very flexible. So we just drummed other countries in their economy. And we just blew past them. Now they've all taken pages from our book. As we keep increasing our taxes, keep adding costs to business, they're beating us like a drum. The worry is more companies are going to choose to locate their workers somewhere else for research and development, other things, because of all these costs. Plus, they're worried about the tax increases that are coming, cap and trade, which will drive up energy costs, then all new regulations. So it's a real concern about, you know, just our economic future. And add on to that, at the end of the day, who's going to pay for all the debt? And who's going to pay for all the debt? Someone is going to. There's no free lunch. So companies, I think it's one of the reasons our economic recovery has been so slow. The word, economic principle is the deeper the recession, the quicker you bounce out of it. In America, we're genetically disposed to bounce back. We're amazing as a country. We hate being in recession. Boom. We want to get back on our feet, get going. This one is so slow, so far behind every other recovery. I think, you tell me if I'm wrong, but I'm convinced it's because businesses look at healthcare mandates, cap and trade, more taxes, more regulation. They're not hiring back the workers. They're not adding new ones. They're not making a new investment. As one of them told me, you know, we have enough trouble predicting the market. Predicting the market in you guys is impossible. I think it's one of the reasons companies are holding on to their money. I think one of the reasons that stock market may hit 11,000 is that companies and individuals aren't making investments in jobs or new business and all that. They're buying stocks and they're doing that. So I think all this wraps up into a really bad business climate. You agree? Is that
No, I agree with that. We already got companies going now. We got people being laid off, and of course, the other question too that people have asked me, and I don't know the answer to. A lot of people get laid off in America from jobs out in the marketplace, but you never read about government employees getting laid off. They either hire more or they just stay there.
Or give themselves a raise.
In the last year, since the stimulus began, we have lost 3.7 million private jobs, and government has gained 300,000. So the stimulus did work. If you work for the government. Yeah.
We are.
And the minute you stop paying for it, those jobs go. And we'd never have recovery unless it's private sector driving. You know, I mean, unless companies are in all these buildings start adding back workers, we won't have recovery.
We talked about the $250,000 back. What about these wealthier seniors? We're talking about 85 to 170,000. This Part D that they're going to have to pick up. Nothing said about how much. What that's going to affect that. That's a pretty good group of the people that utilize this option.
Yeah. Again, they're using theory of tax the wealthy and tax them more. And that's part of it. I can tell you. Go ahead, Doctor.
It's dropping down pretty low. It's not consistent anymore. You're getting into some regular
85,000.
85,000.
You know, just so you know, you guys probably already know this, but you read yesterday, today, 47% of Americans don't pay federal income taxes. You know, so we're getting really fewer and fewer people paying more and more at the burden, children more and more. But the way it is today is we're sitting here, 10% of all the workers in America shoulder 3/4 of the whole burden of government. I mean, we're so heavy on the top end right now. They're going to continue to do that. But what worries me is if you follow generations. I'm the top Republican on the Joint Economic Committee, so we study all the economic issues and what's moving inside it. And so far, Americans move out of poverty in the middle class and then upper income real consistently. I mean, if you look at each generation, almost a quarter of Americans are moving up into the next. Almost very few move backward. We are this middle income, higher, we just keep moving. Until recently, it has slowed down dramatically. And so if you just keep taxing the people who work hard, save, try to make the right decisions, work the weekends, do the extra shift, all that, you're discouraging the very people that drive most of America the right way, And instead of everyone paying just a fair share, even a small share would be the right thing to do. Don't do it for that. Yes, ma'am.
Are there any amount of who's going to benefit from this healthcare bill, and would you indicate, is everybody going to pay a bigger amount of the pot? What about insurance companies and pharmaceutical companies? Because supposedly we're going to, somebody be able to afford a medication, we need to pay for them. So who would benefit?
The one winner, there's lots of discussion about who's the winner and who's the loser. Drug companies are big winners. And you don't see me bashing big drug companies because I think it's almost a miracle that they can bring a new drug to the market. It costs $1 billion on average. Most of them never do it. Human trials, clinical trials, FDA approval, they really get there. So you don't hear me run around, but they made out like bandits in this. And they made an early political calculation. The drug company said, we're going to hire, and they did. They hired 1,105 lobbyists. They put $50 million into the ad campaign. They cut a sweet deal early on with the White House that said, we'll give discounts for seniors in that donut hole. Remember the one I was talking about? We'll give discounts on our medicines there. But in return, what they got was no reimportation of drugs from Canada or anywhere else. No government negotiation of Medicare drug prices. And they got longer protections for their brand name drugs, which means generics are going to take longer to get to the market. Generics, by the way, are a huge help in keeping healthcare costs down. So, of all the industries, I'm glad you asked that question because they made a political gamble that's going to pay off very handsomely.
So if there's no importation from Canada, isn't it the same like your government telling you have to buy all American cars and you can buy Japanese cars? And this is what you have to get.
Well, but it's funny that the pharmaceutical companies spend more on marketing the drugs than they do on research and development.
Right.
And the combination of research and development plus marketing for these drug companies, any drug on the market now, is less than 50% of the cost of the medicine. So they're making huge profit. And this jazz about so hard to bring a drug to market is fallacious. The other thing about the insurance companies, they're making out well because they made record profits last year, and across the board almost, they've had a 40% rise in premium and so forth this year. I don't understand that. When United Healthcare can afford to give a walk-away bonus to their CEO that's about to go to jail if they didn't, of $2.6 billion, that seems a bit excessive. That's a lot of families you can insure. And he had to pay a $400 million fine, but that still left him with $2.1 and $2.2 billion to live on. I could do it maybe. Most of us could. So it really sounds like we're getting it from both ends, by those two entities, insurance companies and pharmaceuticals.
Well, I think you're dead wrong on the numbers on the pharmaceutical companies because
that's what they told us.
That only counts the drugs that make it. All the losses of all the research and all the investment for all those who don't make it adds it up in nature. I'm not defending drug companies. I think they market way too much. I think it's a huge waste of money. They should be marketing to the physicians. And you should know what drugs are there. But that's where. On the other one, the insurance companies, I won't defend them. But I do know, as an industry, the for-profits make a return of about 6% a year, which is about lower than the median for most industries. And non-profits about 2%. Some of their execs make some huge salaries, but as an industry, they're not huge profit makers. And the truth is, my big problem is that we don't have choice of our insurance company. Each state decides who's allowed to be in the state. They set the mandates that decide what kinds of claims we can get. I want the type of competition where you and I can shop across state lines for plans that meet us, where we know the pricing at the doctors' hospitals. We can compare drug prices at our pharmacies, that we can actually shop for health care that's affordable for us rather than what we have today. I think the problem is that we don't have enough competition among insurance plans. And we don't have this choice. We basically get what our business gives us. Tell me if I'm wrong. And we lose it when we go to another job. So, I want to open it up and give us choices. And I am determined before I end my time in Congress, kind of pull that curtain of mystery on pricing back so people can actually see the pricing in healthcare so that we can start making some decisions. I want to see the day where a patient can choose $200 for their share of an MRI, this older machine, versus $1,200 for their share of a CT scan, and they realize I've got a pretty traditional illness, I can do the MRI and be rewarded for it. You know what I mean? And where families actually think through end-of-life care, and they know what those costs are, and they make decisions themselves, not the government, themselves on what costs they will incur and how far they want to go. I think until we get those things in place, I do agree with you, Doctor, on the pricing. I don't think the government or anyone does a good job of controlling costs from above. But when HMOs, with Medicare, squeeze it down, it has really bad results. If the patients make quality decisions, then you can stretch our dollars farther. So, yes, sir.
Knowing how this area, state typically goes, what can we do to help turn that around?
One, continue to speak out to your representatives, both myself, if you're here, and our senators, and the White House. The president is still our president. But I think you're going to have to make a change in the House and the Senate, and that means looking for and getting involved in some other districts, whether it's in Texas or across the country, reaching out to friends or family who live in other states or other areas and ask them to get involved. Because I really think that's how you turn it around. I don't think there's a shortcut.
Congressman Brady, we have time for maybe one more question.
Yes, ma'am.
Why do you think the Republicans lost the election? If they hadn't lost, we wouldn't be in this mess like we're now. And who's the Republican leadership now? I mean,
Yeah.
who do you rally? You have to look at Sarah Palin, you know,
Again.
on somebody else. I mean, who do you have now to look up to?
I think it feels wide open. And again, trying to keep this nonpartisan, but I'm convinced Republicans lost because they spent too much and didn't lead with integrity. In my opinion, until we correct both of them, the same people who fired us won't employ us just to be as blunt as I do think I'm encouraged by a couple of things. One, since 2006, somebody's been working on a moratorium on earmarks. You know, not all earmarks are bad, they've just gotten out of control. The times they do, the spending they do is crazy. It's your money that's being wasted. So we've worked for a number of years, and last month we convinced House Republicans to do a moratorium on earmarks, to call time out until all the abuse can be knocked out. It's sort of like rebooting a computer, turn it off. You know what I mean? So all the junk gets out, and you fix it. Now, which means this year we are not submitting any more earmarks, we're not voting for any, we're not asking anyone else to put one in the polls. And part of the reason for it, I know the Democrats aren't going to go along with that, they've already told us. But the point being, we have to acknowledge our spending mistakes in the past and show we can actually govern fiscally responsibly. So it's one step. The other thing, the reason I gave you a feedback form, if they're out on the chairs, is we've introduced a group of us a constitutional amendment to limit federal spending. We believe the public needs to discipline our federal government and keep them within a limit, because if the government never has to make the choices you do in your family between priorities and you don't have enough money in the bank, I mean, you have to set priorities every day. This hospital does, Dr. Fell does, everyone does, but the federal government does. So I wanted your opinion on whether you think, we never thought 3/4 of states would consider putting a cap on the size of the federal government, but I think things have changed. So I'd like your opinion on that. And I don't know who the heck will be the presidential candidate. Are you running at all? Do you know?
Not as of today, but I'm
Mayor, would you consider it?
She's not old enough, and I'm too old.
Hey, Dr. Phil, can you talk a little about the petition? Because I think what you're doing is so important.
Yes. I handed out these little flyers. These come from the Texas Medical Association, we have joined with other associations across the country to start a petition drive urging Congress to correct the sustained growth ratio, which has caused some of the problems for us. What's happening is that most physicians in Texas feel like we're being squeezed out of Medicare because as the reimbursements go down, this is not just affecting our income, it affects the staff that we hire. We can't pay our electric bills. As a result, physicians in Houston who are being hit first because they have higher overheads than we do here in Livingston. We're already seeing a huge drop in patients, the doctors who are willing to see Medicare and Medicaid patients. The other problem is that every time Medicare drops their prices, the managed care plans, the insurance companies are benchmarked to Medicare. That means that the reimbursements to the doctor's offices go down across the board. That just magnifies the problem. No one seems to talk about that. As a result, the concierge plans are starting to take place. Doctors are starting to say for the office visits, we have to have it cash pay only because they have to pay their staff, they have to pay them. And interestingly enough, when you go to a cash pay plan, your overhead drops dramatically because in Houston, I can tell you, I'm not sure about the plans, the offices here, But in Houston, 30% of the overhead of a doctor's office was billing, trying to get insurance companies to pay what they were contracted to pay. Medicare, interesting enough, is easier to deal with. They may not pay you very much, but they pay what they agreed to pay you. The insurance companies, however, don't do that. And they have all kinds of little cute tricks to try to keep from paying what they owe you. So as a result of all of that, not the AMA, but state societies across the country are starting this petition drive, public drive, raise 1 million signatures to present to Congress, urging them to actually correct, not just bulldoze and push the problem down the roadways, but to actually correct this ratio. It makes it doable for us to stay and continue to see Medicare patients. A lot of us, especially